Coming up, South Korean President Yoon will be meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on the sidelines of the ASEAN summits. A lot to talk about for the trio as Yoon starts his overseas trip on Friday. U.S. President Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping are set to meet in person for the first time on Monday next week during the G20 summit in Bali. Plus, are the U.S. Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes working? The U.S. Consumer Price Index comes to its lowest level since January. Good morning. Welcome to New Day at Arirang. President Yoon embarks on a 6-day Southeast Asia tour on this Friday to take part in this year's ASEAN-related summits in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and the G20 summit in Bali, Indonesia. Not only does President Yoon have multilateral meetings such as the South Korea-ASEAN summit, the ASEAN +3 summit, and the G20 summit in his itinerary, but he also has a number of key sideline and trilateral summits. Confirmed so far are a three-way summit between South Korea, U.S., and Japan, a face-to-face between Presidents Yoon and Biden, among others. But a South Korea-China or a Seoul-Tokyo summit hasn't been confirmed yet. President Yoon will make his ASEAN debut later this Friday in Phnom Penh by introducing South Korea's new Indo-Pacific strategy, as well as his new ASEAN policy. U.S. President Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping are set to meet in person for the first time on Monday next week at the G20 summit in Bali. According to the White House press secretary, on Thursday, the leaders will discuss efforts to maintain and deepen lines of communication between the two countries. All eyes are on whether tensions between the superpowers can be eased as the relationship has deteriorated in recent months after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan was met with fury from Beijing. Meanwhile, U.S. National Security Council officials said the talks would be in-depth and substantive, adding that North Korea's recent provocations and Russia's invasion of Ukraine would be on the agenda. Control of the U.S. Congress still hangs in the balance as ballots from Tuesday's midterm election continue to be counted while key races are too early to call. According to the Associated Press, Republicans have taken 49 seats in the Senate, while Democrats picked up 48 seats as of Friday at 8:30 a.m. Korea Standard Time. Arizona and Nevada Senate races are taking center stage, while voters in Georgia will go back to the polls for a runoff contest early next month on December 6th. As for the House of Representatives, Republicans lead with 209 seats, slowly inching toward the 218 seats, which would deliver them a House majority. Now, Koreans are closely watching the U.S. midterm elections. The result could lead to changes in America's policy, something that can impact the nation in a variety of levels. Kim Dami provides a glimpse of what to expect.
Hopes are low that the U.S. midterm election results will bring drastic change to the Inflation Reduction Act because the law was passed by both Republicans and Democrats. The U.S.-led IRA puts the Korean electric car makers at a serious disadvantage because it excludes EVs assembled outside of North America from benefiting a $7,500 federal tax break. But not all hope is lost because some Republicans have expressed opposition to the law already, and Democrats are proposing an amendment to delay its enforcement for 3 years.
If we continue to negotiate, the Biden administration could make some changes in the interest of South Korea as an ally.
If Republicans take both the Senate and the House, they could try to end the Ukraine crisis. That could leave some room for the South Korean government and businesses to breathe because Seoul then wouldn't need to participate in sanctions on Russia and could reopen flights to Russian territory. North Korea could also be something to watch closely with respect to the election. The regime has unleashed dozens of missiles just this month alone. That includes one short-range ballistic missile into the East Sea on Wednesday. But what many have worried about, the regime's imminent nuclear test could be on hold.
The U.S. is in the midst of a political upheaval, and the results could change to policy regarding the Korean peninsula. So the North may be watching out for that and postponing its nuclear test.
Some experts also note that this was not a presidential election, meaning the results will not result in major changes in terms of Washington's policy on the peninsula. Still, they are significant enough that they could have implications for the next U.S. presidential election. 김다미, Arirang News.
The Consumer Price Index of the U.S., a broad-based measure of goods and services costs, increased less than expected in October. The encouraging report could signal that inflation in the country may have peaked. Kim Yo-sun has more.
The U.S. Consumer Price Index rose less than expected in October, posting a 0.4% increase from the previous month. According to data released by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics on Thursday, the index rose 7.7% on year. Economists had expected the index to rise by 0.6% and 7.9% on month and on year, respectively. This, pundits say, is an indication that inflation is still a threat to the country's economy. However, pressures could be starting to cool soon. The so-called core CPI, which excludes volatile food and energy costs, rose 0.3% for the month and 6.3% on an annual basis, compared to respective estimates of 0.5% and 6.5%. A 2.4% decline in used vehicle prices helped bring down overall inflation figures. Apparel prices also dropped by 0.7%, while medical care services were lower by 0.6%. Following the report, U.S. stock markets reacted sharply, mounting their biggest rally in 2 years. The Dow Jones Industrial Average jumped 3.7%. The Nasdaq surged over 7%, its best since March of 2020, and the S&P 500 also jumped 5.5%, in its biggest rally since April 2020. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
The Korea Development Institute has cut 2023 growth forecast to below 2%, a decline from its outlook for the year of 2.7%, according to KDI, mainly due to weakening exports as the global economy slows down. Next year's economic expansion will likely come to about 1.8%. As for the consumer inflation, it raised the forecast to 3.2%, a decline from this year, which exceeded 5%. It's well above the central bank's target of 2%. Home prices are declining mainly due to higher interest rates. To prevent a huge dip and to help people who need to buy in this market, the government is easing regulations on lending. Ji-young explains further.
Starting next month, South Korea will ease lending regulations for people who own just one home or are trying to buy their first. Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho said during a ministers' meeting on Thursday that the government is rolling out measures to help those who actually need housing. The country's real estate market has been slowing down as surging borrowing costs are scaring buyers away. Chu said the government is aiming for a soft landing to prevent the country's real estate market from excessive contraction.
It is inevitable that the once runaway property prices should be partially adjusted downward. But combined with the recent sharp rate hikes, the government should be alert to avoid a sudden freeze of the real estate market.
For people who own just one home or are trying to buy their first, they'll be able to borrow up to 50% of the assessed value of the home, even in speculative areas. If they meet certain requirements related to the household's combined income, they'll be able to get up to 20% more on top. And with home prices having risen out of reach for many people, the total amount that they can borrow will be expanded from the current 400 million won to 600 million won, or about $440,000. Also, starting next month, mortgage loans will be available when buying homes in speculative regions valued at more than $1 million. These changes were due to be applied early next year, but have been moved forward to be effective starting from December 1st. Ji-young, Arirang News.
The nation's main opposition parties jointly submitted a request for for a parliamentary probe into the Itaewon crowd crush tragedy. President Yoon and the ruling bloc dismissed the need for such measures. They believe it would hinder the ongoing investigations. Kim Bo-kyung fills us in.
President Yoon on Thursday dismissed the opposition party's push for a parliamentary probe, saying people want to find out the truth based on a scientific and legally binding investigation over the Itaewon crowd crush.
저는 일단 경찰 수사 그리고 송치받은 후에 신속한 검찰 수사에 의한 진상 규명이 국민들께서 더 바라시고 계시지 않나 이렇게 생각합니다.
The president's remarks came before Parliament's request for its own investigation had been reported during the plenary session held on Thursday afternoon. Sponsored by over 180 lawmakers, the joint request to set up a special committee that would be in charge of Parliament's own investigation over the Itaewon accident had been submitted by the main opposition Democratic Party of Korea and other minor progressive parties such as Justice Party and Basic Income Party on the previous day. The ruling People Power Party did not take part in the request. Opposition parties have been pushing for a special probe, accusing the government of mishandling the accident and not holding any high-level officials accountable.
A parliamentary probe can find the truth by getting reports from people, verifying the data, and examining witnesses. This is not what the ruling party says, hindering the investigations, but rather to secure the necessary evidence and to help the investigation process by making sure it isn't a selective investigation like it is right now.
To this, the ruling People Power Party says a special probe like this, which would not be legally binding, wouldn't be much help.
Finding out the truth is only possible through legally binding measures such as special police investigation team and prosecutors. A parliamentary probe is non-compulsory, so it will only cause political strife and arguments.
As the request was reported during the plenary session, the National Assembly Speaker is entitled to form a special committee in charge. It is then required to come up with an investigation plan. That is scheduled to be approved at the next plenary session, which is on November 24th. With the deadline set for the 24th, which is the day Special Committee's investigation probe plan is scheduled to be approved, eyes are on the ruling PPP's next move and whether it will eventually decide to take part. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Ukraine's military has announced that it has retaken territory in Kherson following the withdrawal of Russian troops from the area on Thursday. The news, which comes on the 37th week of Russia's war in Ukraine, could potentially hand Ukraine another major victory. Videos show that Ukrainian forces are moving into several villages in the region, receiving an emotional welcome from some elderly residents who appear to have stayed through Moscow's occupation. Ukrainian officials, however, also warned that they should not let their guards down yet, as retreating Russian soldiers could turn the regional capital into a, quote, city of death on their way out. Tomorrow, we'll see a major step toward the World Cup in Qatar, taken when South Korea's squad for the tournament will be announced. Coach Bento has already said that he will include Son Heung-min despite not being fully recovered from a facial injury. But fans are still concerned over Son's health and are anxiously waiting to see who will be representing South Korea at the World Cup. For more, let's connect with Kim Tae-ryung, sportscaster and CEO of football training company The F. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Now, we know Son is going to travel with the team regardless, but on the field, who will be the captain while Son gets back to full fitness?
Yeah, Son Heung-min will go to Qatar as captain of the Korean national team, and he delivered a firm message on his Instagram last Wednesday. And he said that if there was only a 1% chance, he will see the possibility and run forward. He'll probably play with a mask to protect his injured face. And regarding this, Son Heung-min moved fans by saying, if you think about the mask you've been patiently wearing for the last 2 years, the mask I'll be wearing at the World Cup is nothing. So Sonny will go to Qatar World Cup, but there could be some problems with playing time. When Son is not on the field, experienced players should lead the team. We expect players like Kim Young-won and Jung Woo-young to play the role of leaders. In football, leaders and ace are different. Son Heung-min is a top player who has grown from an ace to a good leader. I hope he can play a lot of time in the World Cup, but if that doesn't happen, the Korean team has good leaders who can help Son.
Right, and in terms of the void left in Son's absence, who would be most likely replacing him? We know Hwang Hee-chan is another winger who will be on the field already, so do you have another player to step up in the forward position?
Yeah, the first group stage match against Uruguay is less than 2 weeks away. Son Heung-min is a very difficult player to replace, but there is a possibility that he will not play in Korea's first match of the World Cup. So it won't be easy, but Ben too will also be preparing about this. If you anticipate his disposition, it is highly likely that will be no selection that will surprise everyone in the current situation. But Ben too will try to find the optimal combination using 3 familiar strikers, Hwang Hee-chan, Hwang Hee-joo, and Jo Kyu-sung. Personally, I think Jo Kyu-sung can be a very good choice. He's young and inexperienced, but strong and tough. And he's been performing very good, well, until recently.
You're right. And there's $1 million question that a lot of fans are waiting for. Do you think Lee Kang-in will be included in this final list, considering his recent form?
Very difficult, but the final roster of the World Cup will be announced tomorrow. As you know, Bentu doesn't like big changes. About 90% of the final list has been outlined, and only 2 or 3 players are contested. The big concern is Lee Kang-in. He was selected to the national team for the first time in a year and a half in September, but he did not play in 2 games. However, Lee Kang-in is playing really well in La Liga this season. I think it's right to take Lee Kang-in to Qatar because he's a player with specialty and he's doing well at this point. But everyone agrees, my thoughts are meaningless.
Right, but
I don't know, but Bentu will choose. But I expect Lee Kang-in's sporting probability to be maybe 51%.
Right, and don't you think that Lee Kang-in's run in the younger FIFA in 2018, I believe, should help him with give him a little advantage as he's experienced a long run in a global tournament?
Oh yeah, of course he has experience, and also he has a specialty on his left foot, and historically, if Korean national team joined the World Cup, we make some good points by the set piece. So as this role, he can be really good, important player for the national team.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your insights this morning, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Now, for a look at the news from around the world, we turn to our Matthew Ashley, standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning.
Good morning, Doyon.
Let's start in the U.S. state of Florida, which has been hit by a rare November hurricane.
Well, that is right. At least 2 people have been killed, and some residents are under mandatory evacuation orders following the arrival of Hurricane Nicole on Thursday, local time. Now, it initially made landfall on Florida's east coast as a Category 1 hurricane with wind speeds of up to 120 kilometers per hour. But it has since weakened to a tropical storm moving northwest across the state. Now, amid reported storm surges, powerful waves and heavy rain, 270,000 homes and businesses are still without power, and several homes have been flooded. Officials have opened 15 emergency shelters in affected areas, and schools have been shut, and 600 troops from the National Guard have been activated. Now, most Floridians are under tropical storm warnings and have been urged to remain indoors. In his first company-wide email to employees, new Twitter owner Elon Musk has ordered the immediate end to remote work. This means Twitter employees will be required to clock in at least 40 hours at their office each week. Musk also added a warning that difficult times lie ahead as the company is heavily dependent on advertisers for revenue. The platform's earnings have been affected by a slowing global economy, while some advertisers are pausing spending while they review Twitter's updated content moderation policy. Meanwhile, the billionaire added that without sizable revenue from subscriptions, the platform is unlikely to survive an economic downturn. Twitter laid off about half its 7,500 employees worldwide last week. In a further restriction on women's rights in Afghanistan, the Taliban have banned women from going to gyms and amusement parks. According to a ministry official on Thursday, the bans come as orders on gender segregation and dress codes at these facilities were allegedly being ignored. The bans have come into force this week after officials reportedly tried to implement separate day access to some sites and gender segregation at others. Following the new measure, a number of gyms and amusement parks have been left empty, patrolled by Taliban enforcers. It has sparked concerns among business owners over their livelihoods. The latest restrictions on women's freedoms comes over 1 year after the Taliban retook power in the country last August. And finally, several new world records were set on Thursday as part of Guinness World Records Day. The day celebrating world records got its start in 2004 to mark the Guinness World Records book becoming the best-selling copyright book of all time. This year's theme of super skills saw UK student George Scoley break the record for the most rotating puzzle cubes solved on a skateboard at 500 cubes. Meanwhile, freestyle footballer Ben Nuttall crushed the most crossovers completed in 1 minute, going from 46 to the new high of 53. And the record for the most hula hoops spun at the same time while standing on stilts was also broken, with performance artist Mariam Aliwola spinning 25 hoops.
Good morning. It's a dusty start for most regions again. Dust levels in Seoul returned to normal temporarily, but will hike back to bad levels, while Incheon, Gyeonggi-do, and Chungcheong-do provinces remain under an ultra-fine dust advisory, with levels very bad at times. Temperature-wise, Ipdong, the beginning of winter on the seasonal calendar, has already passed, but temperatures remain way warmer than normal. Even parts of Gangneung in Gangwon-do province saw spring flowers blooming a couple of days ago. Seoul, Gwangju, and Busan will see a high of 22 degrees Celsius this afternoon. The warming trend continues into Sunday morning with much-needed nationwide rain in the forecast this weekend to help to push away the dust in the air, and will also bring cooler air to the country next week. Now, that rain starts from Jeju tomorrow before spreading rest of the country into Sunday. And 5 to 60 millimeters of rain is in the forecast nationwide. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
Now that wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. We'll be back next week for our Monday's edition at the same time. Please stay with us for more updates throughout the day, though. Have a lovely day or evening wherever you are, and take care.
백섬에